Okay, for this video we're going to do multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Okay, so for our first example, it's going to be the easiest one we do. So when you have a rational expression in the numerator and the denominator of a fraction, division equation, I don't know. The first thing you can look for is things that you can like cross out or cancel out. So in this, you can see we have an x plus 3 in the numerator and the denominator. So you can go ahead and just cancel those out, and that'll like get rid of them. So what you're left with is 3x minus 5 over 2x plus 3. So now you can't do anything else right now. You can't cross anything out. You don't know how to do this. So this right here is your simplified version. I might say, okay, so great, we're done yet. No, you're not done. You have to check for undefined values. And what an undefined value is if the x value that you plug into the denominator of this equation, if it's gonna get you 0, then it's undefined. I hope that makes sense. I have no idea if it's gonna make sense, but you'll see in a second. So basically, I call it like doing an undefined check. So to basically do an undefined check, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the two factors in your original denominator, not in this denominator. Don't use this one. Use this one. Because like on a test or something, if you use this one, you're going to get the question wrong because you're missing a whole factor. So you've got to use the original denominator. So what you do is you take your factor and you set it equal to 0. And then for this one, you subtract 3 and then divide by 2 to isolate the x value. So you have negative 3/2. But because if you plug this in to this down here, both of these factors for x, you're going to get 0 as your answer. And that can't happen because you can't divide by 0. And so this is your first one. So you just put a little dash through the equal sign to show that you can't, or that it can't equal 0, or that it doesn't. So I'm going to write a little note to myself that like says avoid, because that's what you want to do. You got to avoid that number. So the next factor is x plus 3, and this one is easy. You just subtract 3. So now you have x equals negative 3, but you actually have x cannot equal negative 3. And I'm going to write avoid again because it's helpful. Okay, so this is all you have to do for this problem. You have your simplified value, you have your undefined values, or value, depending on the problem. And yeah, that's it. Okay, so this equation or problem is a little bit different. So what we have is 2x to the 4th y to the 5th divided by 3x squared times 15x squared divided by 8x cubed y squared. So actually the first thing you want to do is multiply across, because it's kind of hard to do the whole division thing, especially because you don't have a y here and you don't have a y here. It just doesn't work. So what you want to do is you multiply across. So the first thing you do is you multiply these coefficients. 2 times 15 is 30 over 3 times 8, which is 24. Okay, then next you want to multiply your variables, oh my goodness, variables. So you have x to the 4th and x squared. So you add, I almost said multiply, you add your exponents and you get 6 because 4 plus 2 is 6. And then your y just stays as it is because, oh my goodness, why can I not draw this line? Because there's no y like over here. So for this one, you have x squared plus times x to the 3rd, and you add your exponents and you get x to the 5th, and then you have y squared, and that's just like hanging out, so you gotta pull it over. So then you can go ahead and like simplify everything and do a little bit of dividing. So 30 over 24 simplifies to 5 over 4, and then if you do x to the 6th divided by x to the 5th, you're going to get just x, or x to the 1st. And it's going to be in the top because it's not a negative. exponent. If it was a negative exponent, you'd put it in the bottom in the denominator. And then if you do y to the 5th divided by y squared, you're going to get y to the 3rd because 5 minus 2 is 3. And it's not a negative number, so it's in the top, not the bottom. You got to make sure that you're putting variables and numbers on the right side of the fraction line, divider line, I don't really know. And then this is your final simplified answer. And then for this one, you don't need to do an undefined check because there's two different variables in this equation, and we don't know how to do the undefined check for that, so you're good to go. That's your answer, that's all you need. Okay, so this example looks really tricky, but it's actually not that bad. So your first step is you're going to simplify each of these. So for this one, you're going to GCF it. It has a GCF of 2, so then you have x squared minus 25 over, and then you can factor this one. So you have x, and then for this, you have a factor of 5 and 1, which adds up to 6. So you have x plus 5 and x plus 1. And then you're dividing by, you can also factor this, but it's a bit different than this one because there's a negative 6, not a positive 6. So you need to make sure that you are paying attention to the signs in front of each part of the equation. So when you factor this one, you can do x minus 5 and x minus 1 because it'll still multiply to positive 5 because you have two negative numbers, but it'll add to negative 6 because it's also two negatives. So, that did not work. So you have that over this, which you can GCF, and you have 3x plus 1. And you'll notice that we still have this, and we can still simplify this. So I'm going to draw a little arrow, and then I'm going to move over here. And so you still have this 2, but you just have x plus 5 and x minus 5 because it's the difference of squares rule, and negative 5 times positive 5 will get you negative 25. So then you still have the same thing like here, but when you want to divide by a fraction, you need to multiply by the reciprocal. So you can change this sign to a multiplication sign, and then you can draw your little fraction line, but you need to flip these two. So I'm going to draw a little arrow to remind myself. So you have 3 parentheses x plus 1 on the top, and then you have x minus 5 and x minus 1 on the bottom. So now that you flipped, you can't do this before you flip, but now that you flipped, you can start crossing out and canceling out. So you have x minus 5 on the top and bottom, you have x plus 1 on the top and bottom, and you have x plus 5 on the top and bottom. So what you're left with is 2 times 3 over x minus 1, which then simplifies to 6 over x minus 1. So you can't simplify this anymore. Everything is all done. So now you box this, and that is your answer. But you still have to do an undefined check. Now, for this undefined check, it's a little bit different. So you have to use both versions of the denominator. So you got to use this version and this version, and obviously they're like the first fraction, which doesn't change. So you have x plus 5 equals 0, and remember to do this, you just set each factor to 0. X plus 1 equals 0, 3 parentheses x plus 1 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0, and hopefully I can fit this. Let me draw a little line. And then x minus 1 equals 0. So I'm just going to go through. You can subtract 5. You get x cannot equal negative 5 because that'll make the denominator undefined. And then if you have, x plus 1, you subtract 1, and then x cannot be negative 1. You divide by 3, So here divided by 3 is 0. And then you have x cannot equal negative 1 again. And then you have x minus 5, so you add 5. X cannot equal positive 5. And then you have x minus 1. Oh, remove that. And then you have x cannot equal positive 1. So these are all your undefined values. I'm just going to concisely put them together. X cannot equal negative 5, negative 1, positive 5, and 1. And that is all of them that it cannot equal. And this is your final simplified answer, and these are all your undefined values.